I've said we've been operational since the beginning of July. We got our tasking letter from the Minister on the 1st of July, and that set out the clear objectives of the Commission. And all of this material is available on the Maritime Skills Commission website. But in a nutshell, we are looking at making sure that we understand the skills needs, including technological change. We're trying to identify skills gaps and shortages. We want to ensure that the sector has the apprenticeships and the qualifications that it needs. We want to make sure that the training provision exists. We want to be sure that we are clear about career paths and opportunities. We want to ensure that there are high quality recruits available across the maritime industry. And most relevant for today's session, we are tasked with increasing our educational exports. Now, to fulfill those objectives, the Commission has set already a scheme of work which we're working through. We're making progress with regard to a seafarer cadet review because we were tasked in the letter to look at the smart funding arrangements. We're also, we've had a labour market intelligence report published. That's also available on the website. We're looking at the future workforce for ports. We're looking at autonomous skills, digital learning, and this is the start of our engagement with exports. And we are aware that the UK has a tremendous reputation for exports in terms of education. It's one of the largest exports within the UK. And what we want to do is to make sure that we can maintain that, develop it further, improve it, and of course, specifically identify how we can increase exports with regard to maritime education and training. So that's the purpose of this discussion. That's a little bit of a background to the Commission. As I say, really looking forward to this morning's discussion. So thank you all for joining us. And we're going to be led through the next couple of hours by Ian McKinnon, who is one of the commissioners. There are a number of commissioners in the meeting this morning. So delighted now to hand over to Ian, and then I'll come back and provide some summary at the end. So thank you, Ian.
Good. Well, thanks very much, Graham. Thanks for the welcome and the introduction. I'll say one or two words about what we're doing and how we'll go about it, and then I'll hand on to Jonathan, Alex, Kathy and Steve for the three presentations. I'm really pleased that colleagues in Department of International Trade have been so keen to work with us and to support this event. You'll hear shortly from Jonathan Ledger, who's the TVET lead, Technical and Vocational Education and Training in the education team. He's joined on the call by his colleague Stefan John. We'll then hear from Alex Morello, who's Deputy Maritime Sector Lead. I put Marine in the covering email. I'm the first person in history to confuse Maritime and Marine. I apologise. Sorry, Alex. It should be Maritime team. Alex is joined on the call by his colleague, Stephen Jones. And imagine my delight as I watched Maritime UK's annual award ceremony last month to see the International Trade Award going to a training company, and then to find out that Versec are signed up as DIT ambassadors. So I'm really pleased that both Kathy Walwork and Steve Richards, who founded the company and ran the company, are on the call today, and they're going to tell us their story as our third presentation and draw out some of the lessons from the challenges they faced and challenges they've obviously overcome. And then we've got a good hour for discussion. We've put 5 starter questions in your invitation mails, but of course there's scope to raise anything else that's on your mind. Because we've allowed lots of time for discussion and the questions, please do keep your questions until the end or put them in the chat function and we'll pick them up. One or two wrap-up comments and then we will finish by 12 because everybody's busy and we know you need to get on. Please stay on mute during the presentations and when you're not talking so we can cut out the background noise, all the dogs and children and neighbours, leaf blowers and all that kind of lark. And please note that we will be recording the event and putting the recording on the Maritime Skills Commission's website. Just to give you the address, maritimeskillscommission.uk, nice and simple. This is an exploratory event. Graham explained that it's one of the 7 objectives set forward by the Minister. We've deliberately cast our net wide for this event, and you'll have seen the broad range of people who've accepted the invitation, covering the whole of the maritime sector, universities and colleges, private training companies and professional bodies, organisations seeking profit from working overseas and others working on a non-profit basis. offering their expertise in a different sort of way. Some of you have a good deal of experience and expertise working overseas, others much less. No doubt every one of you will be able to think of somebody else who could have been involved in the call. They haven't missed out, not too late. We hope this is the start of a conversation and absolutely not the end. They can join in later. And as Graham said, we're being joined by one or two other of the Maritime Skills Commissioners, all whom have got some experience and expertise of their own in international work. Could I hand on now, and let's start with the first presentation, Jonathan Ledger from the Education Team, Department for International Trade. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you so much indeed. Good morning to you all. Let me just share my presentation. Grateful for your confirmation that you can see it.
Yes.
Great, thanks. Good morning, everybody. Jonathan Ledger, the Technical and Vocational Education and Training Specialist from the Department for International Trade. And I thought I'd just give a little overview to DIT as well as the education team, and my colleague Alex will give a specific focus on marine and the marine team within DIT. But first, before I do that, may I just take this opportunity to reinforce the pitch at the moment in terms of the EU transition, and that time is running out, and we are really urging all businesses and all individuals to go along to the government website to make sure that they're fully prepared. And so if you're not the top in your organisation, please do check with your senior management team to make sure they're on the case. I'm sure they are. There's a few things which are, will be available in the email, but the UK Gov website /transition, and there's an inquiry form there if you have any particular questions. There's a series of 1-hour webinars and some recordings, and of course there are other links associated with this on BAYS, DEFRA and HMRC as well. So just wanted to start with that. There's a big push on that at the moment, just to make sure that everybody is indeed prepared. On to DIT. So the Department for International Trade, a ministerial department that was born just after the Brexit vote. We have representatives all over the world, so over 100 countries, and a network of international trade advisors across the UK. And we offer a range of services, events and programs. And I'm going to talk about some of those in a moment. In particular for the education team, which is one of 16 industrial clusters within the Department for International Trade. And as I mentioned, we've got Alex from the Marine team. He'll come on shortly and give his presentation. But from an education perspective, we're really interested in helping governments across the world with systemic reform, so global reform if we can. Of course, we do a lot of individual projects, funded projects, and my colleague Stefan, I'll invite him actually just to give us 2 minutes of one that's happening in Indonesia that's maritime related, just as an example. And we're really working with organizations overseas and stakeholders and governments to develop their economies, to grow their economies in a sustainable way, and to really look at an appropriately skilled workforce in key priority industrial areas. And of course, maritime is one of those areas, particularly for seafaring nations. And we build that on world-class best practice. So it isn't necessarily about exporting the UK system, it's about exporting UK global expertise in skills and education. The UK system is for the UK, and we must make sure that we contextualize and localize what we do overseas. So it's not about that wholesale export of that. And what we want to try and do is to create mutually beneficial opportunities. We're not about giving it away. This is about, commercial activity, or at least full cost recovery. And this involves everything literally from, initial discussions around labour market priorities, all the way through, capacity development, curriculum development, implementation, continuous professional development, certification and beyond. So, it's the full suite of education that we're looking at. And in the education team specifically, we have a layer of civil servants that effectively look after the geographies, and then supporting them, there are 5 of me. Stephen John is another one who looks after secondary benefits associated with aid-funded programs. And then we have somebody that looks after higher education, somebody that looks after English language, and somebody that has a combined role looking after EdTech and private independent schools. So we cover the full range between us, and the idea is that we're plumbed into industry. In terms of DIT, a range of activities really, from coordinating roundtable discussions like this, but also we do them at government to government level or stakeholder and government agency level, but also we do them at employer level. So just a couple of weeks ago, having a similar conversation with government and a load of employers in an industrial zone in Jamaica, trying to understand, what they want to do in skills and education and how they might want to move that forward. And of course, most importantly, identifying who's got the money, the authority and the need in terms of actually progressing stuff, because there's no point in having a long list of activities that people want to achieve in education if they don't actually have the means to finance it in some way. So we really do, take a big interest in those kind of elements. We're able to make formal introductions to our government staff overseas, and those in turn are able to connect with local government ministries and stakeholders and companies. We also work with institutions across the world, making sure that they are plumbed in and connected where they need to be. And we'll look at things like, market barriers, how to overcome them. So we'll kind of bring those into trade talks and discussions that we have in each of those countries. And the most important thing, I guess, in this is that we are really talking to decision makers. We are really building on that relationship that we have and then introducing them to UK training providers and companies across the piece. So our role is that we're here to help with exports and imports. So we deal a lot with foreign direct investment, FDI, but actually in skills, most of our role is looking overseas, particularly in the skills arena, and how we might export that UK expertise. And as I said, we have a project already underway in Maritime, so we're keen to make sure that we build on that. And our approach is that we adapt actually to each of the subsectors, but also to each individual. So there's no company too small that we deal with in education. I deal with some people that are literally chasing bits of work that are worth £10,000 up to £500,000, up to 5 million. It depends on what it is, but it really doesn't matter. The size is not important. What's important is that you're selling your A game overseas. No mediocre stuff. We want the very top of your game, the gold ticket stuff. And actually, in a lot of cases, we're finding that people need to work together and organizations need to work together in their very specialist area of expertise. And if you bolt several organizations together, we end up with a fantastic offer that we can export overseas and that people are really keen to purchase from us. So as I mentioned, we showcased all elements of education, independent schools, English language, technical and vocational, higher education, and tech suppliers. And of course, the tech suppliers part in particular is important at the moment with the COVID pandemic, because of course, a lot of education is moving online and we need to be innovative and creative and really responsive. And the UK says that it's responsive, but there was a time at the beginning of COVID when we asked all the colleges, for example, how much stuff they had available online that we could promote around the world at the start of COVID, and almost no college had anything that was purchasable online. And of course, that position has shifted now. So it's been good. It's helped leapfrog on the approach to using technology. But, we have to be more responsive in a very changing and competitive world, because our competition comes from places like China, it comes from Korea, Japan, Canada, Australia, and we have to be able to, keep our head above the rest of our competition. And we have a diverse landscape in our skills education. I particularly love this slide, even though you probably are struggling to see it, but it covers all the elements of education, whether it's assessment techniques or whether it's careers or technology or robotics or workforce planning. All of that is available through all of the education components in the UK. A bit about DIT now. So many of you, if you haven't exported already, will know that DIT is there to support the growth of exports. And you can see a lot of this yourself. So you can just Google DIT opportunities, and you will be able to see a mailing list that you can join and search all of the opportunities that are currently available from all around the world. You can also Google DIT events, and there are lots of free webinars, and there are trade missions and all sorts of things where you can get involved and build up your experience and to see what's available and talk to people in those countries. And then, of course, on top of those events and webinars, we do actually have some trade missions. A lot of those, of course, are virtual at the moment, but once we get back to some normality, hopefully planes will start moving again. And available on the government website are a load of market insights by country and by region, and it is worth looking those up. It gives you GDP figures, what the priorities are, things like that. So in this presentation, I have included some slides, some links rather, we'll come on to that in a moment. One of the big things I wanted to talk to you about was UK export finance. So it's hidden within DIT. It's not supposed to be hidden, but I think most people don't really know about it. UK export finance offers a range of insurance and banking solutions that will help you secure and manage your deal going forward. So if you win a contract, they might be able to provide you with, bond insurance, or if you have a deal where you don't get paid for 6 months, they might be able to provide some bridging finance, all backed by government and available through your high street branches of your bank. So effectively, UK Export Finance has worked really closely with the international banking managers, and as soon as you access them on the high street level, you're accessing straight into the DIT UK Export Finance. So definitely worth having a look at. Many people don't know it's there, and a lot of people in education think that it doesn't actually apply to them, and education it definitely does apply. So please don't think just because you're education you're not included in that. So here are those links. I've included some on here. Actually, I do have a longer list of links. So if somebody is interested in some more self-help type links to useful information, please do let me know, and I'm happy to send that out to you on a personal basis. Ian, thanks. I'm just going to invite my colleague Stefan in just to give 2 minutes, please, if he could, about the opportunity that's going on in Maritime. In Indonesia. Stefan, if you're available, please.
I am here. I don't think I'll do 2 minutes. I'll try and do it in a minute and a half. So, hi everybody. My name is Stefan John. I work with Jonathan at the Department for International Trade, and I focus specifically on a project called Skills for Prosperity, but also look at other projects of that ilk. And as you know, the UK and lots of other countries offer aid around the world for a range of activities, most of it humanitarian every year. But Skills for Prosperity and probably a couple of other programs offer aid to what we call middle income countries or developing countries, or I guess for us, countries which maybe offer opportunities to develop parts of their economy which help them to obviously be competitive worldwide. At the moment, Skills for Prosperity is working in Southeast Asia, which I'm sure all of you know is very much a kind of maritime hub. And the first sort of project which has kind of come up for us is in Indonesia. And I know some people online will already be familiar with the project and probably be working with some of our colleagues out in Indonesia on this. But it's an aid project, and what has happened with it is there's in actual fact there's in total there is 7 figures involved in this aid project, but I think we need, one of the things I wanted to get over is obviously it's a competitive field when we're talking about aid projects. B, there is often very big opportunities, not just on the project, but also through the projects to get further collaboration, further partnership, further sort of like commercial relationships in those countries. And that seems to be what's happening in Indonesia, where the aid project is very UK facing. We've got some UK organizations, universities who are already involved in that in that project and the procurement for that project.
Hi, how you doing?
All right.
Good. Sorry, let me just turn this volume down.
But importantly,
Whoever's not
Listening
on,
into a
could you be
maritime
on mute,
skills
please?
thing. No, it's going on for hours. Jules is sitting on it as well. It's all right. No, Jules is.
Hello, sorry.
Yeah, no,
Hello,
Jules
sorry.
is sitting in on it.
Hello.
So,
There's somebody in UKSA. Please turn your mic off. Thanks.
Luckily enough, he didn't say
Carry on,
anything bad
Stefan.
about anybody before it was too late.
Not a chance. Yeah. If you could
Stefan, yes,
draw to a close, please, Stefan, and we'll move on.
Indeed, yeah. So just to obviously make everybody aware that for the industry, I think we need to have a if you like a kind of value proposition so that when these
the meeting host should be able to deal with this.
React quite quickly.
Just dismiss the participant.
Thanks very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, can I please ask you, if you're not actually a presenter, can you please make sure that you are on mute? It does spoil it for everybody else. Thank you. Can I hand over, please, to Alex now? Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I've been having some technical issues of my own, and my work laptop is currently on the blink, so I've had to switch to my my iPad. Stephen, would you be able to share? Okay, fantastic, brilliant. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so I'll just kick off. Thanks for that, Jonathan. Hi everyone, my name is Alex Marullo. I've just joined DOT Maritime team from the Department of Transport. I'm just going to give you a very quick presentation today about what the Maritime team is and where we kind of fit into wider DIT structures. Could I get to the next slide, please? Ian, would you be able to? So I've just sent you, or Stephen's just sent you another slide deck. Would you be able to upload that one? I sent one just now, but I had to send it from my personal email because my work laptop's not working.
I don't see it actually, Alex.
Okay, no worries. I'll crack on anyway. So you can, if you just skip to slide 3.
Stephen got that.
Or Stephen, yeah. I'll say, well, I'll just kick off, and then hopefully Stephen will be able to get that the slides up in a minute. So I'm from a DIT Maritime team. As the name would suggest, we are a sector team, so we focus solely on maritime. There are 6 of us in the team, 2 of whom are external consultants, one of whom, Stephen Jones, I'm sure many of you know, is in attendance today. We sit in the Technology and Advanced Manufacturing Group, which is part of the larger Global Trade and Investment Directorate. So we sit along teams such as automotives and aerospace, who often work on joint projects with us. Again, very much similar to what Jonathan was saying earlier, one of our key priorities is to boost UK maritime exports, not only in goods, but also in services. You'll see oh, fantastic. Yeah, I think that's slide 3. If you could just skip to slide 2. Or go back to slide 2 even. Oh no, that's still the other one. That's fine. That's fine. I'll just continue. Yeah. So as I was saying, one of our key priorities is to boost UK maritime exports, not only in goods but also in services. As a service-based economy in the UK, this is key to our success. And as many of you know, we have an impressive range of maritime services in the country. Despite this, we've not traditionally been very good, and Jonathan was alluding to this earlier, we've not traditionally been very good at promoting our own companies in the UK. Our European competitors are often much better at promoting their own companies globally than we are. For instance, Germany does 4 times more trade with India than we do, which is fairly damning considering the cultural and historic links between India and the UK. So our team is basically here to bridge that gap. Yeah, if we could skip to the next slide. So another key objective of the Maritime team is also to encourage foreign direct investment in the UK maritime industries, whether this be in research and development, the port sector, marine manufacturing. Investment's really going to be key to maintaining a globally competitive sector. So yeah, what can we do for you? Again, our UK overseas network, as Jonathan was saying, since the referendum, the government's been sort of bolstering our diplomatic network to support our trading interests. So this overseas trading network is now fairly extensive. We've recruited heavily in sort of these overseas posts. Often these people who we've recruited are local, so they'll speak the local language, they'll have an extensive knowledge of the industry, and we can also bring some sort of a good network of contacts to the table. And this is a real asset when we're looking to help companies set up in new markets or expand within existing ones. So for instance, you could have a company wishing to export maritime training services or legal services or even engine parts to Brazil, say. And we can set up the meetings that can facilitate market entry. Comms, we can help increase awareness of opportunities globally. Through our regular contact with our overseas network, we often become aware of big projects in the pipeline which UK companies can get involved with. We recognise this is probably somewhere we need to do better. But we endeavour to reach out to UK companies or institutions who'd be well placed to bid for these contracts when these opportunities arise. And we do have an extensive sort of database of contacts for this purpose. So if you'd like to be included, you can write to that address on the right of your screen there. Events, we often have a presence at overseas in UK-based events and conferences, which help promote the UK Maritime's offer, of which obviously training and educational services is a key part. And we often do this in collaboration with our stakeholders in the maritime industry. So it's another key area where we can add value. What else? The Maritime team is very open to new ideas about how we can add value and assist UK exporters. That's why meetings like this are really valuable for us. We're always keen to hear about how we can best offer our support. So please do reach out to us with any ideas about how we can improve. I think that's about it from me. There'll be opportunity. I don't know how you want to do it, Ian. We can. I'd imagine there'll be a session later where I can field questions. But
yes, please.
Yeah, if you do have any questions that you think of later, you can write to that address on screen there, and we can respond to you that way.
Thanks very much, Alex. Yes, we've got plenty of time for questions, deliberately allowing lots of time for questions and discussion. So thank you very much, Jonathan, Stefan, Alex, for introducing Department for International Trade to everybody, explaining the offer that's available. Can I hand over now to Kathy and Steve to explain from a business perspective how it's worked for you?
Hi, thank you, Ian, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you all. Yes, VERSEC, formerly Virtual Training Centre, we rebranded at the beginning of November. We're just getting the presentation ready now. Is everyone able to see the screen?
Oh gosh,
not yet.
All right, okay.
Sorry, I'm just going to get back to it. Share screen. Let's share screen on this. There we go. Share screen. Sorry, 1 second.
Sorry about that.
Just while they're tackling the presentation, ladies and gentlemen, just a reminder, if you have any questions, you can use the chat function on Zoom to post any questions or comments. and we'll pick those up in the Q&A section a bit later on. It's always useful to have a few questions if you have any, and don't forget the only silly question is the one you forgot to ask. You have some experts online and we ought to take advantage of their time. Over to you, Kathy.
Thank you, thank you. All right, I think, can everyone see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes, lovely. So yeah, we'll tell you our story. We've broke it down into certain parts. So we have virtual training centre, and we are fully approved by the UK DFT, Maritime Coast Guard Agency.
Been approved since 2016, and we're fully accredited under the CPD accreditation board as well. So basically what we do is provide training either accredited by the MCA, or we have it under CPD if it's not MCA required.
Yeah, we launched our training in January 2017, but we set the company up in May 2016. So it took us a good 6 months to get all the technology behind the training, which that was a journey in itself, making sure that we're using the right suppliers. And in the just short of 4 years that we've been providing our training, we worked into over 120 countries, and that includes every country within Europe, which we were delighted with. So we've had, even from an accounting side of things, we've had to learn the European MOS sector, how to provide the returns and what have you, which again with Brexit on the horizon, that's probably all due to change, but we haven't heard yet.
One of the first companies to have all three levels of STC WISPS training 100% online and fully approved under the MCA. This took a lot of work. It took us 1.5 years just to have the PSA originally qualified to be 100% online through the DFT MCA. And the other two courses followed on from there.
Yeah, we were delighted earlier this month to be awarded winners for international trade. It was it's a real accolade to receive this award, and we're very, very proud. And
we were pretty surprised, to say the least. It was a bit of a shock when we got pulled into that room.
Yes. And last week there were the PD Ports Northern Powerhouse Export Awards for export, and we were delighted again to win another award for e-commerce exporter of the year. For both of these awards, we were surprised really, because we're up against really good competition. Yeah. And this year as well, we've worked alongside the DIT as export champions, and we've found a lot of their resources valuable. There's lots of, like I know that's mentioned earlier, there's the virtual trade missions, there's lots of webinars, there's lots of information with regards to Brexit and the potential challenges for export. Yeah, so I'll leave this one to you, Steve.
As I briefly covered before, gaining approval with an organisation as prestigious as the MCA, or DFT Maritime Coast Guard Agency, is quite phenomenal, really, to get all our courses, to be the first to do them 100% online and go through all the process of being able to prove how we monitor, how we report, how we have to be able to invigilate, how we verify learners, verify invigilators. It was all one hell of a lot of going. International competition. Cheaper alternatives is not always the right alternative. Okay, one of the lessons we've found, and we still find and still experience, are companies, clients coming to us and saying, there's cheaper out there, there's this, there's that. Why are you so expensive? We're not expensive. We found that we are quite middle of the road for the pricing. But we also found out there's a lot of companies out there who will go for a lesser qualification or recognition, such as, for example, I don't want to badmouth anybody, but if you did the Liberian flag, for example, it's an easier process than going through the MCA, because the MCA, and I wish some of them were on here, would say it is a gold standard. And that's what we want to be able to produce and provide for everybody. Recruiting the right people in a rapid growth environment. One of the challenges we definitely faced was the requirement to be able to grow the company before you had the capital to be able to grow the company. So to bring in the right people at the right time to provide the right products and services was a very big challenge when you're growing, very big. Technology, choosing the right systems and service providers. Again, as Kathy briefly touched on when we started out, we had a whole website and LMS, a learning management system built specific to us. It was a bespoke build, which started to fall in on itself in the first year. The people who built it did not build it correctly, and it was a very big challenge to be able to transition from a failing system into a brand new state-of-the-art one, which cost a pretty penny as well, to make it all work right.
Yeah,
I'll let you do this
and
one.
then we had this earlier this year. It was actually by accident we found them. It was on LinkedIn, but there was a company over in Canada, and basically put an advert on, and Steve had said, that's our course. So a Canadian company had copied not just the content word for our training, but also they'd copied our business model. They had a website that had a mission statement exactly the same as ours, word for word. We approached our IP lawyers, and they said it's a flagrant infringement. But due to the fact that they're based in Quebec, there wasn't anything that we could do about it unless we took it to the Canadian courts, and it would cost us £100,000 just to pursue it. We talked about it, but then decided that the best way forward is to focus on what we're doing. We're obviously doing something right. We're passionate about what we do, and so we thought we'll just get on with it.
Yeah, you've got to focus on what you've got.
Yeah.
It's okay. Finding like-minded strategic partners is a very important part of growing your business. It's okay trying to do everything on your own, but it's impossible. You've got to know when to bite your bullet and find somebody else out there who can help you grow. And maybe at some point it may require some of your, what's the word I'm looking for? Some of your shares going one way, or some business model changing, or you're changing your whole direction of what you first started out as. But you've got to find the right partners. It's very important. And also support is very important as well.
I think as well, it was touched on the last presentation about partners and partnering. And I think it's really important that to be the best you can is to work with other like-minded people and all work collaboratively together. And then, yeah, meeting the requirements of working with large corporates. We're a small organisation, and we're finding that it's costing a lot of money in with regards to contracts. Because we're quite forward-thinking in delivering this training online, and one of the first companies to take the STCW 100%, all 3 levels. There are issues with the contracts. When they come to us, they're not actually fit for purpose. They're more aligned to classroom training. So we're finding we're having to invest heavily within that side of things as well.
Yeah, what you'll find is large corporates will always let the expense come onto the smaller companies to fund, to change their agreements.
Yeah,
that's something we've found consistent at the moment.
Yeah, if we want to work with them, I think we're finding that we're having to invest. And COVID, obviously, we can't do a presentation and talk about challenges without talking about COVID. We've been very fortunate in the fact that we provide online training, and we've had the opportunity to grow during this this year. It's been difficult though, not having the team together. We're all working remotely, and when you're working on, when you're working on your courses and the creation, and it's quite difficult when you're not all together to be able to check, are you all on the same line? And I mean, this is your side of things, isn't it?
Yeah, basically having a creative team is like having a body that's got its arms in one room, its legs in the other, its head in another. And you really need to be in the same place, and obviously COVID does affect it, but having these things like Zoom and Microsoft Teams and things does help. But in my opinion, it doesn't replace being in the same room.
I think as well, we've had to recruit during COVID, and again, that's new to us. Yeah.
It's challenging. Oh, yeah.
And Brexit, yeah, we've just talked briefly about Brexit, and just making sure, again, the DIT have talked about the gov.uk going on there and making sure that you're going to be completely compliant come January.
What is working for us?
Yeah, we've mentioned before about the importance of collaboration and working effectively together, and that runs through everything. The whole through from suppliers, your customers, your advisors,
New partners.
Making use of the resources available from the Department for International Trade as well. They've been really helpful with us, haven't we? We've got a great advisor based here over in Manchester.
Very important to invest in your team and develop your skill sets. We took it from a startup company where everything was basically being done by 1 or 2 people who are trying to wear 7 or 8 hats. In a small company, obviously you've got restrictions with funding and what you can pay out there to start up. It is important as you grow is to set aside money to develop your team, to grow your team, to bring in the right skill sets. We've recently done this. We're due to release a new LMS soon, which the authoring system's called Articulate Storyline. It's enabled us to up our game a hell of a lot, and we'll be releasing that within 2021. So I don't know if anybody knows our company out there, but if you actually see the current capabilities of it and what we'll release next year, you'll see the importance of being able to grow and develop.
Yeah, and the importance of planning, and so that you know your focus, that your team can all align with your focus, and you go on that journey together, and keep revisiting and keeping yourselves on track. Or sometimes something comes in that changes things slightly, but yeah, the planning is crucial. It's
important to have a good business plan, but your business plan has to be a living document where you test and adjust it at strategic times to make sure you're still on track. And if you're not on the same path anymore of that journey, find out what is working for you, what isn't. And the only way you can do that is have something to keep referring to. Maintain the highest quality for your products and services. When we started off as a company researching into online products within the same categories that we're providing, there's a lot of stuff out there that is quite basic. There's a lot of commercially providing courses where it's kept very simple, very quick, just to get the courses out there to turn the profit to the company. We believe in taking our courses to a different level to bring in the high quality. It's a bit like buying a cheap car or buying a Rolls Royce. It depends on what kind of drive you want from it. If you want to have learners experience something that's engaging, interactive, makes them go away feeling like the money they've paid was well worth what they've paid out there. If that's important to you, it's very important to maintain the quality of your products and services. That basically covers the same one. Apologies for that.
And what's really important is listening to your customers. We have feedback after all our courses, and we read it all. We act on constructive criticism or feedback, and that again, that's how we grow and get to know our customer. And thank you all. Thank you for listening.
It was very brief. Apologies for that, but threw it together in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
No, that's great. Thank you very much, Kathy and Steve. And thanks again to Jonathan and Alex for their presentations. We'll just stick, no slides now, we'll go into the discussion. Please stay on mute unless you're actually talking, so we avoid all the background noise. There's one or two questions, 3 questions so far in the chat, and I'll start with those. The first one's the question from Paul Little, principal at City of Glasgow College. Paul's asking about COP26, the climate change conference, which is going to be in Glasgow next year. And he's asking what Department for International Trade is doing about it. Give you a chance to come back afterwards, Paul, when we've got a response from DIT. Alex or Stephen, do you want to go with that first?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here, Ian. Yeah, so DIT have no confirmed plans as of yet. It's just under a year away. I know DFT have been working hard on COP26, so if there's anyone from DFT on the call, they may be able to give a more satisfactory answer. But we do recognise it's a huge opportunity to showcase the UK's green maritime offer globally. So I'd be quite surprised if DIT weren't involved in some way.
Stephen, Jonathan?
Nothing further from me on that one. I'm happy to look at the issue of the due diligence and the IP, but if Jonathan has something on COP26 first.
Come back to that in a minute, Stephen. Thanks. Jonathan?
Yeah, nothing from the education team on COP26 at this time.
Okay, fine. Kerry Horahan from the Department for Transport is on the call, but she's had to dip out because with Chrissy Clark, she's briefing the Minister on diversity in maritime, one part of Maritime UK's business, and their ministerial call overlaps slightly, which is a pity, but she may be able to say something later. Paul, you want to say something and to repeat your kind and generous offer? I see you offering to host DIT.
Thanks, Ian.
The college, go for it.
Yeah, I guess my immediate reaction is I'm absolutely astounded DIT has no plans for COP26. Since I've already, for over a year, I've really been talking to all the major bodies, IMO, the Chamber, Shipping, and others, because it was supposed to be, you know, this year. And if we're still playing catch up this time next year, I think DIT is going to come late to the party. So it's just a reminder, DIT, and also to say we're likely to be the maritime hub in Glasgow for that. So if you are looking for some sort of visibility, you really need to talk to us this side of Christmas. Otherwise, there'll be no space left for you.
Thanks, Paul. Should we pick up Catherine Nielsen's question? Catherine's Director of Merchant Navy Training Board, asking about due diligence. And you were going to respond to that, Stephen?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Stephen Jones. I'm the Maritime Services and Ports Specialist in the DIT Maritime team, so working with Alex and colleagues. And one of the really kind of the day-to-day things we focus on is engagement. We have a 5-year plan of working with companies, and the basic pillars of that are support, access, and intelligence. And obviously this issue of due diligence, who you're working with, what are the threats and risks imposed by doing so. Versek touched upon the issue of, you know, contractual due diligence and making sure you're not landed holding the baby at every point. Obviously things you need to be careful of. What we have, as Alex alluded to, is we have colleagues who work out in overseas posts, so the key markets, and they're a very important part of this jigsaw of how we are able to help connect you as companies to not only opportunities overseas, but we're able to kind of dig a little bit deeper to understand the kind of mood music around what's going on, and potentially some of the companies involved. We can't do all the legwork, but we can do some initial kind of, do you know these? Are these okay? So just to help you get along kind of onto that journey. Nothing can substitute your own due diligence. Of course, that's your commercial kind of rationale of the way you do things. But we're certainly there to try to help point you in the right direction. We have an annual event called Developing Sector Knowledge, where we bring diplomats from overseas into our industry, and we help to introduce them to companies such as yourself. And it's good to see some familiar faces from John Moore's and Videotel on the call, because they were at last year's DSK meeting some of these diplomats in overseas posts. I think that's helped to foster some positive relationships. Just jumping quickly onto the issue of the IP and brand protection, we're looking at this issue very closely. We're just about to pull together a webinar in Singapore, but that will be looking at these issues and of the impact and also some of the threats again. So these things are in train, and we're very happy to help, assist and support companies that want that.
Thanks, Stephen. Do you want to come back, Catherine? Follow on? No need.
Thanks, Stephen. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we have criteria that we have to meet in the business that we're in, but that's really helpful. I think having someone on the ground with the knowledge in that local area is extremely helpful, no matter how small or how big your business. But thanks very much for that, Stephen. Much appreciated.
Okay, and Roy, you were Roy Gardner, City of Glasgow College. You were asking about IP and brand. Do you want to follow up?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Yeah, so similar to that, it's just some advice that's available to us. We've got a number of projects running just now overseas, and some of them are very early in the stage. With due diligence, we do that. We work with local offices, we work with British Council as well to try and understand the institutions that we work with, etc., in terms of their reputation. But around the IP, it's worth just to see if there's any advice out there, legal advice that we could do just to safeguard ourselves. I mean, sometimes you go into these partnerships openly, and a lot of it's predicated in trust, but it's just to see if there's some advice out there that we can access.
Well, as I say, hopefully the event in Singapore that we're looking to hold soon is with a leading law firm who've been involved in that field. What we've been doing is we've been working with a lot of maritime startups, and of course the enthusiasm with which to throw yourself into and onto a market can sometimes place their IP into difficulties. And as Raal has pointed out in the chat, the IP issue is critical. So it's certainly something we're looking at too, and I'd be very happy to kind of keep you in the loop on that, Roy, and anyone else who wants to be involved.
Thank you. Will that be early in the new year, the Singapore webinar?
Will it be what, sorry?
Early in 2021?
I would have thought so now. Yeah, we wanted it this year, but there's been a few complications. I'm not sure if it's noticed.
No problem. Thank you.
If people have got questions, stick your hand up or stick something in the chat. Then pick up Sharjan's question. Sharjan Lacoste from Fleetwood Nautical Campus, asking about DIT and UKVI working together. When I visited Fleetwood first 20 years ago, there were far more international students there than there are now. And Neil pointed out in the paragraph that we've got in the document that UK rules get in the way. Who wants to pick that one up?
I'll pick it up, particularly through COVID. So let me deal with that first. DIT Education worked a lot with UKVI, but also with the Home Office to ensure there were lots of flexibilities around visas. And I'm pleased to say that the UK was the worldwide #1 destination for students, even during this crisis. So, it shows how much the Home Office flexed the rules. And there is ongoing activity. And I think I would always say it comes down to the case that we put forward. So if you really believe that there is a large number of students in the maritime sector that we're missing out on, and that UK universities and colleges can't get access to because of the current rules and regulations, then we particularly need to hear from you so that we can present that information to the Home Office and campaign to have those flexibilities built in. They always listen. We can't always guarantee that we get what we want, but they have flexed a lot in the last few months, and they are really keen to make sure that they support us whenever they can. So I would say you just need to ask and present that case. I think the thing to remember is that they're getting hit from all sides, because everybody's got a request about something to do with getting somebody into the country, and so we've got to make sure we've just got a rock solid case. Thanks. Oh, and on due diligence, I just wanted to say about that, if I could as well. On due diligence, please do talk to the team at DIT, whether it's education or marine. There's a lot of expertise even here in the UK on due diligence and self-help and things like that, and they can connect you with lawyers in different countries and all sorts. So really, I would say, you know, if you're really struggling with your own IP protection and what to do, then please just talk to somebody first before you start diving in, so that at least, you know, you can be effective and efficient with the sources that we do have available.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. And I'd certainly know on the UK VI points that I see Gary Highmarch is there from my army. We had a useful meeting, what was it, 3-4 years ago, Gary, with the Home Office. And they listened and changed the rules in a very helpful way for colleges working with cadets overseas. You've got a question too, Gary, about DIT. How does DIT know what's the current maritime education officer? How providers keep you updated?
Well, that's an obligation of the providers, effectively, to keep us informed of what they're up to, what case studies there are. So if I use Glasgow, the City of Glasgow College as an example of that, we work really closely with Roy and his team. He keeps us up to date. He's involved in a variety of projects, and we know what they are, and if these capability changes, he lets us know. You've got to remember that we're dealing with, you know, if we just take the skills space, so, you know, all the universities in the UK, over 200 universities, 6,500 different training providers, and 305 further education colleges across all the sectors, because that's the one thing about education, it cuts across all sectors. And so there is an onus on each of those, you know, to keep us up to date. And whilst we do what we can to engage at every level, you know, we can't cover everybody all the time. So we just make sure that we say to people, please, as you develop new products and services, you know, we need to know what they are. If you build your capability into a particular sector or subsector, we need to know what that is. And if you have case studies, then we definitely need to see those, because they're the things that we can showcase to stakeholders and to governments and to employers around the world.
Thanks, Jonathan. It'd be maybe talk that through a bit further a little later on, because we've got the document that we've pulled together with some information, but understanding from your point of view the best way to do things would be very helpful.
Yeah, we don't, I mean, sadly, what we don't do, you know, we don't really kind of keep a full catalogue as such, because the problem with a catalogue type approach is once you print it, it goes out of date because something changes.
Yeah, sure. Gary, do you want to say anything back?
Sorry, I'm struggling to mute myself there. Yeah, that's fine. I was just looking for a conversation about how the various people at this meeting and outside the meeting keep the DIT informed. Because the more information they have, the more responsive they can be to the international client.
Absolutely. And the other bit is, you know, as already mentioned by Stephen, we do have events that happen where we ask for participation from universities and colleges and employers of all sorts and shapes and sizes to be able to showcase, you know, their expertise when we're talking to government partners overseas. So, you know, that's the other reason for staying connected with DIT, is so that you can hear about those opportunities. And you know, at the moment, of course, being virtual, it normally means that, you know, it's a 10-minute speaking slot on you know, as part of some bigger session, but you know, those are the kind of opportunities that really showcase what you're trying to achieve overseas.
Okay, thanks. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. I'm going through the questions in the chat first, and then I'll pick up the questions I put as prompts. Darryl Bate, one of the directors of the Marine Society, is asking about links with British Council and how DIT and British Council work together. Who wants to pick that up?
Okay, so DIT Education has a really close relationship with British Council. And from an education perspective, DIT Education manages the work that they do. So whether it's English language, whether it's the higher education, or whether it's their involvement in skills or any other part of education. So a lot of the work that happens in British Council is kind of known to or you know, at the behest of DIT and government. There is a Education is Great campaign, and that is run partly through British Council with a focus on higher education, though not on skills. British Council do skills, but they do that when they win pots of money either from UK government or from other aid agencies. Apart from that, British Council will use their own pot to fund some skills programmes, but skills is not their formal remit. Higher education and English language are the two key areas, but skills isn't their remit. and effectively they've kind of grown into the space of skills because, you know, it's been lacking from the UK over the years. So, you know, but they're not necessarily the best ones to do it because, you know, they're not specialists in that space necessarily. So, but, you know, again, anything you want to do with British Council connect into, then please do let me know.
Thanks, Jonathan. As a consultant, I've worked pretty closely with British Council. In fact, I did some work for them and for the Association of Colleges, looking at how colleges in the UK could internationalise. At that stage, it was Tracy Ferrier heading the technical vocational education team in British Council, a former colleague of mine as it happens, and her number two, Chris Cooper, who is a former colleague of mine. So I think there's some interest there, but I agree that they tend to translate, have tended to translate education as either being ESOL or higher education, and there's some scope. Do you want to come back, Darryl?
Sorry, just only to say that, you know, the venues, I see Matt's Gilbert from the ICS said that they're quite cost prohibitive to use, but they do have excellent locations and venues. So it's a pity that, you know, more isn't being done, or perhaps more could be done through this conversation.
Yeah, so they do offer exam services around the world, but that's a fully commercial activity that the British Council have, and is nothing to do with anything that DIT does with them. So in that sense, you know, you just really need to be talking and negotiating with British Council, because nothing we can do about that. That's their full commercial activity.
Okay, I'll pick up Dileep's question. You're asking, Dileep, about MCA and how far DIT is working with MCA. Probably a question for you, Stephen. We did have a chief executive of the MCA as one of the Maritime Skills Commissioners, and he was meant to be on the call, but understandably got some other things going on in his life, so he's not been able to join in the end. Stephen, Alex?
I think that's probably one more for Alex in his role as coming from DFT. So maybe the links between the two are slightly better understood internally. I'm much more outward focused with companies and out to post. So,
okay.
Yeah, sorry to pass that question back. I probably would be a better question for DFT actually, as MCA is part of DFT. But maybe when Kerry's back on the call, she might be able to field that question.
Okay, we'll try and pick that up later, and if that's not possible, then we'll pick it up through email exchanges afterwards. And then Emma Mupavic, sorry, I'm not sure whether it's Emma or Emma, I apologise, please correct me in a moment, asking about links between DIT and the Engineering Council. Stephen, is that you?
Afraid not.
DIT education deals with the Engineering Council, and also what was SEMTA, the Sector Skills Council for Engineering, which is now Ingenuity. Yeah. So we have a close relationship with them, and they deal with all ranges of engineering, so not just for automotive, but marine and aerospace as well. And they have, you know, a variety of campaigns from, you know, careers to women into engineering and all sorts. So we do work closely with them. We also work closely with the chartered bodies in engineering, to, you know, because one of the big things is that we have a Chartered is Great campaign. So we are promoting chartered bodies around the world, and that includes engineering.
Okay, thank you. Emma, do you want to come back? And please tell me how to pronounce your name, sorry. No? Okay, we'll move on. Lars, too long for me to try and summarise. Do you just want to say what you want to say out of that? Lars, sorry, Lars.
Morning, Ian. I'll try.
Two Larses on the call. Apologies, Lars Lippener.
Morning, all. Just several colleges on the call, and I'm sure they will all feel the same way. There's currently a lot of international students coming to the UK to study, which I think is very desirable to the UK. I generally speaking think the more maritime professionals we can expose to UK maritime education and training is a good thing, and that should be quite that should include seafaring as well as short-based courses. But we just need to be very careful that we don't inadvertently cannibalize what we're doing now. So the idea of just relocating that activity abroad, I think would backfire. What we need to do is to expand, to throw the net wider, to drive additional business. If I give you one example, we've got a big collaboration in Greece, got nearly 500 students on there. These are students that wouldn't have studied to UK MCA requirements otherwise, so that's additional business. But even with these studies, although they're doing the majority of the work abroad in Greece, they're still coming for parts of it to the UK and creating that really high affinity to the UK, which I think is very important if we look at trying to maximize the future prosperity for the UK maritime sector as a whole.
That's a really, really good point, Lars. Thank you for that. What I would say is that the DIT education, if you look at the whole sector across education, exports coming into the UK is worth over 20 billion a year. In terms of going out, in terms of exports, actually it's only about 20% of that. So in terms of education, we've got a long way to go before we end up doing more out of country than we do in the UK. So, you know, the education sector generally adds significant balance to the UK prosperity. And that's why, you know, I talked earlier about, you know, the Home Office, for example, being so very flexible in order to protect that, because it's really, really important that we do bring it into the UK. But, you know, when DIT is working in education, we really are looking at the benefit back to the UK across all those strands of education. So whether the money is earned overseas or in the UK, what we are interested in is making sure as much of that money comes back to the UK and UK companies. And it doesn't just mean, you know, into an education provider. This can be into an engineering company, a supply chain company, you know, and the wider piece.
Thanks. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Lars. Should we throw it open more widely? One of the things that we're really interested to talk through is what the barriers are and what's stopping organisations from doing more overseas, doing more in terms of exporting. It could be all sorts of things. We heard something about visas earlier from Fleetwood. Who wants to comment on that? And obviously, particularly thinking about barriers that we collectively, somebody on the call might be able to do something about. One clear to me when I chaired the board of my local FE college was that finding time was a difficulty. Just nothing more than that, squeezing out the time and the priority, and persuading some colleagues that doing stuff overseas was a worthy thing to be doing, alongside all the things we were doing for our local community. And I was waving a flag consistently, and it seemed to work, and we won a Queen's Award for Export, but we had a really good team in the end. But it was quite hard work winning that priority. And in talking to a number of people on the call in the past, I know that it's been quite difficult finding the development time. And does that fit with other people's knowledge, experience?
Ian, Jonathan, I'll just actually kind of go along with that. The art of identifying opportunities and then pursuing them is a long-term game. You know, none of these things happen overnight. And I know there are colleagues on the phone that will know this, that they've actually been, you know, chasing a lead that was kind of lukewarm, tepid at best, you know, with maybe a link to UK education in some way, and then it takes 2 or 3 years to develop that relationship, and then they, you know, when they finally decide they want it all yesterday, and you've kind of got to step up your game. This due diligence process that goes with it, though, actually is really, really important. it takes a long time to build on those relationships. And as much as people think it's not about the relationships, it's about capability, actually a lot of it is still about the relationship side of it, and that's why it takes such a long time. Also, of course, you've got to remember that the economic situation and political situation overseas in many countries is not so stable as the UK, and I use that kind of tongue in cheek, but it's much more flexible overseas. And what usually happens is we'll get so far down the road with a particular angle on education, for example, and then the education minister will change and everything will change as part of that deal when we're back to the drawing board. So I think one of those things that everyone's got to have is that persistence to be able to stay with it. And of course, hunting for leads in itself needs dedicated time. This is one of the biggest problems that I see with providers, is they don't actually, register with the donor banks and keep an eye on those leads and look on the government website here and look at those leads and all of that. They're sitting there waiting for somebody to knock on the door, and that's not the way to grow your business.
Thanks, Jonathan. Paul Little, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I just thought I would kind of add some insight, Ian, just to your comment. Obviously, we've been doing this for about 50 years, and we set up the first maritime college in India 25 years ago. I think ultimately you need to staff this, resource this, have a strategy for your international export, and then see it as an investment. But I want to pick up Jonathan's point about partners. There's a huge danger that organizations spend time reinventing the wheel, and that actually is just costly and counterproductive. So there is a major role for organizations, like UKVI, and obviously the role of DIT and others. But I think it was my point about the regulator. To a certain extent, we can export, but we are exporting the gold standard in seafarer training. So I'm disappointed the MCA wasn't represented in this call, because we have to work very closely with the regulator. And if we kind of are seen to actually do what DIT wants and actually to export our A game, I have to be very careful that doesn't run foul of some of the obligations that we have to the MCA. So I'd like actually maybe the MCA to kind of work more closely with providers to make this more possible. And I know it's only recently, under Brian's leadership, got its act together about trying to export the UK flag and shipping register that we've got, and it's better than it ever was. But there is a kind of major handicap that providers can only go so far, but the role of the government agencies, take us that next stage. And I think if you have invested, as we have for a long time, in this export market, what's holding us back is that kind of part of the partnership. We need them to deliver too.
Great, thanks, Paul. I mean, as you know, as I said, Brian Johnson did intend to join the call, I think at least as much as Chief Executive of the MCA as a commissioner, because the international work has been a very important part of what he's been trying to do, sorting out some problems, but I think rebalancing things in the way that you're talking about so that he can be useful to those of you who are active.
Can I just add a comment? Two quick things. Paul, you make a really good point there about the sector working together to present one thing. And one thing I always complain about in the skills space is, because everybody obviously is trying to earn a living, often they have competing offers and it can be really confusing for the client. And this is the one thing that we have to keep in the focus of our minds, is what does all of this look like to the client? Because the skill system is complex to the UK people, let alone what it might look like to foreign people in their countries, in their systems, and in their societies. So it is important, I think. You make a really good point about that kind of single focus way of working, and then sharing things when it comes in. So Roy comments again about wanting to collaborate with colleagues, and I started by making that point about it being your A game that you need to bring to the party. And one thing I've noticed, sadly, is when a lot of providers get on an aeroplane, suddenly they're experts in everything that they don't do in the UK. And I think you really have to kind of stick to the best bits and work together. And if you can do that under a single offer, I tell you what, you will win that business, because you'll have all of that capacity. It protects you as well. You have shared IP. You have shared risk management. You know, all of these things become much more robust just by working together.
Just following on that, could I ask you to comment, Fee Horrell from Plymouth City College, Plymouth, having been on an aeroplane with Fee, going to different places, sharing expertise. Talk about your experience, Fee.
Yeah, well, I think our experience is we've been involved in international education for a long time, but in very traditional areas such as business and the Chinese market and Southeast Asia. But obviously, we're looking at writing our strategy, our international strategy and overall college strategic plan, and really picking out our USP in terms of, you know, a couple of sectors where we're really key in terms of health and maritime and marine, and really demonstrating to our governors. We've had quite a change in our leadership and governing body here, and actually it's really laying out the investment required for our international programs if we're going to grow it. And that's part of the buy-in. And I think the AOC, the Association of Colleges, have done quite a lot of reports in the past about, you know, it does, and Jonathan just said it, you know, it does take 5 to 7 years plus to develop those markets. And, you know, as long as people understand that that's the investment is required, the return on investment might not be for another 5 to 7 years, and that's quite key.
Anything particular, Fee, from your experience about how you perceive that it's worth getting stuck in?
I think in terms of, I mean, I'm City College Plymouth, so as a city, we're quite, you know, in terms of international education, we've worked obviously with Plymouth University. We've got colleagues on the line, but yeah, we've been involved in international education for a long time, and it's benefited both the city obviously and the college considerably. And staff retention, actually, I think that's not to be underestimated. Our international activities does actually involves quite a lot of cross-college staffing, and actually, you know, in an FE world where getting experienced, incredible individuals working for you is difficult, particularly in the areas of engineering, etc. Having international opportunities to teach, study, capacity building, etc. abroad is actually quite a staff incentive for them to stay.
I'm glad you said that, because I was very conscious when I was chair of governors that our international stuff wasn't just about collecting the money, and our head of international was very keen to emphasize how enriching it was to have overseas students in as part of the mix.
Absolutely.
The Brits
and it's still true, you know, we're welcoming a lot of international students in January, February, and despite COVID, there's still a massive appetite for students to travel, which is really encouraging. And actually, it's the economic impact that does provide for the city, you know, in terms of retail, host families, accommodation, etc. It's quite important.
Okay, thanks. And Stephen Gosling, you're talking about barriers the other way around, barriers overseas. Do you want to develop that brief comment a bit further?
Yes, happily. So, of course, we deal in the space of online training.
Sorry, just say who you are, Stephen, in case people don't know.
Sorry, it's Stephen Gosling, Quality Assurance Manager, Ocean Technologies Group. And we deal, you know, we're in the business of providing online training to a global audience of seafarers, and have a pedigree for doing that for 20 plus years. And although we would like to, very often we'd like to take that further and have online training as a primary source of training in other countries, of course, the administrations in those countries need to accept that training for delivery in their jurisdiction. And some countries out there just simply have no standards by which to judge online training. They have no form for approving online training. It's a technology, and it's a solution that they've never worked with. So either they cannot approve it and they run a mile from it because they don't know, or it would not be approved because it compromises their own internal training. So taking your product to overseas markets it's possible to do, but getting it approved and getting it in place in that country can sometimes be a different challenge.
Suggestions?
I'm not sure if it needs perhaps a more diplomatic approach from higher up, because we're all trying to meet the same common international standards, principally, you know, STCW, but there are other conventions as well. And what we're doing, as we've heard from everybody on this call, is we're trying to meet and share with the world the gold standard of training, or at least that's what we all hope we do. And I think we can all learn from that, and we can all become better seafarers and better mariners as a result. So I would just like to have a bit more field time with these, with overseas administrations to say, just give us a chance, just see what we've got and what we can do, rather than close the door because you've never seen this before, you've never worked with somebody in the UK.
So if in some way we were able to collect together experience from people like you and feed it into DIT, would colleagues in DIT be able to do something with that?
We already do a lot in that space, and actually the world has picked up, particularly in online. So whenever we have trade talks, or actually because we have a lot of working groups, education working groups with governments in particular countries, the mutual recognition of qualifications in all their forms is always on the agenda. So, for example, in China, we, last year, after 3 years of campaigning, we finally got all of the further education colleges accepted by the Chinese government as UK approved, government approved, and so therefore they would accept them to work in country without having a Chinese partner and these kind of things. So, there are some countries where we have a standard mutual recognition of qualifications, like Dubai, for example, and there are others that we're working on. But partly you're right, Ian. I guess if you're working in countries where you want that to happen and it's not happening, then talk to us. But there are a lot of those conversations already ongoing. So, for example, I know, because I'm involved, I'm having those discussions with the ministries in Malaysia, and it is complex because some countries have more than one that look after a particular part of education. So in Malaysia, there are 7 ministries, all with their finger in the pie in technical and vocational education and training. And within those 7 ministries, there are 15 different departments. So it takes a long time to kind of work that through. If you go to Myanmar, then there's 23 ministries. So I have a lot of fun with them. But, we are doing that already. But, if there are places where you think we need to do more in that conversation, then we need to hear from you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yep. Shajan, I missed your comment. Do you want to develop it a bit further? You're all talking about other barriers, including fear of losing IP. Shajan? No? Oh well, carry on. Anybody else want to jump in at this point? Richard Falk, you made a comment there. Do you want to add to that? No? Okay. Right.
Can I? Actually, Richard's online now. Richard.
Yeah. So, sorry about that. Yeah, look, I just wanted to follow up a little bit more. The comment as far as recognition overseas.
Just say who you are, Richard, for those who don't know.
Yeah, so my name's Richard Falk. I'm the Director of Training and Qualifications for the RYA. So we've got about 1/3 of our training centres now overseas, and many of those are leisure boating based, but equally many focus on commercial training in the small commercial vessel sector, super yachts, workboats, and so on. One of the things that we've found hasn't worked is trying to make direct contact with government or regulators in foreign countries. In some cases, it's just been a closed door. In other cases, it's been shall we say, a resistance against anything British. Lots of politics involved. But what we have found works very well is working with established, respected partners in those various countries who effectively make the approach to the government to identify for that government or that regulatory body a solution that they don't currently have. And that solution in many cases is RYA training. So of the 21 countries that our commercial qualifications are recognized in, I think 19 of those have come about as a result of us using a local business, in some cases a local individual on the ground who's influential, is tapped into the industry, and is able to effectively introduce us and the RWA schemes to the local regulator. And we've had a great deal of success with that.
Some places, Royal in your title opens doors, and in some other places it closes doors.
Absolutely.
Kathy and Steve, when we're looking at barriers, I mean, barriers that you've identified where you think some additional help could be done to be put in place to bring them down?
Yeah, I think that listening to the feedback about the barriers, a lot of it, yeah, it's very pertinent to ourselves. I think with regards to perhaps approval of courses as well, that's a big one for us. It's quite a challenge sometimes. So you're asked for certain courses, and it's just getting those accredited. But yeah, I'm identify with a lot of the comments. And
any particular suggestions out of that?
Can't really.
No, sorry, don't mean to put you on the spot. But...
That's okay. What about you, Steve? Have you got any feedback? Listening.
Sorry, what's the question?
It's about feedback for the call. Sorry. No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
I don't know the exact question.
Okay. And any other, thanks. Any other comments and thoughts on barriers and what they are and what anyone might do about them?
If I could just come back in very quickly about the kind of collaboration or the champion approach in a market. Certainly in other sectors, it's something that works exceptionally well. It's, you know, we're very much focused, certainly from my role in DIT, about that relationship building. So if we can get a company to start and develop a positive relationship out in the market, then that does allow the doors to begin to open against other barriers as well. So I'd certainly think it's a hugely important part of the solution. You know, from government can get involved and go and knock on doors and try to address things from that perspective. But I think it's a very powerful and compelling message when it comes from a powerful company in a particular jurisdiction, when they want you and they bring you along through as well. So it is a really important part of the jigsaw.
Thanks, Stephen. Let's move on to how we build a capability statement, because I think that feeds in very well. Many of you have responded to the invitation to provide a paragraph or so explaining what your organisation's up to. And it's not intended in any sense to be a first draft of a capability statement, but I wanted to see the range of what was going on. I've certainly learned something. I'm sure everybody else has learned something from that. A big range. And I think there's a couple of thoughts in there about what we might try and do. I mean, I've found as a consultant, very much agreeing with the point that Steve made earlier about sharing, partnering with others, because you increase your capability and increase the chances of winning something you couldn't win on your own. But I think I've also, as a consultant, turned down offers, opportunities and things, taking Jonathan's point about, you know, building my expertise as I fly somewhere. No, actually, I just say no and say, I really don't know about that, but can I introduce you to somebody else who does? And I'm using my personal contacts to do that. But if we all know more about what everybody else is up to, we're in a much stronger position to say, that's not what my organisation does, but somebody else I know does, can I introduce you? And then UK PLC wins out of that. So some part of the purpose of just sharing who we are and what we're doing is about making sure that we all know what everybody else is up to and can do and is interested in. So even if it's an area of expertise that doesn't overlap, to know that you're both on the flight to Indonesia and so on is really helpful. And then the other part of it is telling people overseas what we're up to. And Jonathan said earlier in his presentation, or possibly just at the end of it, that having a static directory doesn't work terribly well because it's obviously out of date before it's finished being printed. But some form of explaining what we're all about feels to me like a good idea. Quite how we do that, I don't know. Comments, thoughts? Is this something we should be doing? We Commission should be doing.
Ian, Jonathan. So I think yes, and I can share this with you. But you know, technical and vocational, we have a kind of a UK-wide brochure. So it's only a few pages that explains kind of key parts, and you could very easily, you know, come up with something like that that covers, you know, different case studies of international delivery within marine, without being, you know, too specific that it comes down to provide a level, but you know, kind of second topic, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So I think there is something about, you know, creating that catalogue. I think the other thing is that would be really, really useful along with that, apart from the network creation, and maybe today is the launch of that network creation, where, you know, there are regular sharing activities. I would suggest that what we need is almost like a case study collection point that we can put these into, and whether that's on the back of the Commission's website or something, but you know, we should be able to at least go to a page and there should be a whole load of case studies of real things that are happening overseas. And just as a point on that, don't talk about necessarily what you do, talk about the impact that it creates and the benefit that it brings locally, because that's really where the world is looking at the moment. It's not interested in, you know, the fact that it does this or it does that. It really is about it does this to create, you know, sustainability and value. And then finally, I would just say that actually I think it's worth, as a result of this discussion, holding some online virtual showcases of maritime education expertise overseas, and then us using that to invite you know, government staff from around the world to plumb into those, to hear what the latest kind of innovations are, particularly around online learning in the maritime space. Because the more we can plant that seed in the front of their mind, the more when they're talking to companies and stakeholders and governments in country, you'll be right at the front of their thoughts. So, and I think then that gives you an opportunity to be well represented. And when we do that, just bear in mind, usually what we do, Ian, we're doing one of those for the west of the world because of the time zones, one for the kind of mid-Europe, and then one for the Far East. So it's probably 3 different showcases, but that, you know, given the number of education providers online, you know, that looks like there's opportunities for all of you to have a part in at least one of those.
Really helpful.
And we'd be happy to coordinate.
Thank you. Offer accepted. Really helpful. Comments from everybody?
Ian, could I just make a comment there?
Gary.
Some years ago, we used to attend like speed dating sessions where...
Showing your age, Gary.
Yeah, well, no, this was more for the Department of Transport, rather, just in case people think it was some other forum that I was attending. And we used to link up with the various embassies around the world. With the current platforms, online platforms, could that be reenacted? And we could easily do it through this platform to the DIT colleagues abroad.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean, actually, Gary. So we're already doing that with other areas, and what I'm saying is let's set something up for Maritime to be able to do that. So it's our overseas staff, you know, in the embassies and consulates around the world, to bring them up to speed, not only in maritime, but in maritime education. I think the two are, you know, we need to grab the 2 teams because they are sometimes and often different people in each country. And so, you know, what the way that the international network is, that in some countries education won't be a huge priority just because it's not you know, seen as a revenue earner for the UK, but actually there might be 0.25 of a person along with somebody that is really focused 100% on maritime engineering, and so we want to make sure that we have both of those people on the line when we do that showcasing. So that's what I mean when I talk about an online showcase, is getting as many staff from Her Majesty's government in all its forms online as possible that have relevance.
Okay, helpful, thank you. And just worth saying as background, for those who don't know, Maritime UK itself does a good deal on exports. It shares with Department for International Trade a Maritime Export and Investment Advisory Group, and there's a 5-year strategy which is agreed between Maritime UK and DIT for exporting maritime services. Is one of the 5 strands in that. So the capability statements that Stephen and colleagues produced a couple of months ago that we circulated. That's one of the fruits of that relationship. And in the original invitation mail, we flagged an event this time next week that DIT and Maritime UK are hosting about exporting to Brazil. So there's a good deal of that stuff going on anyway. Much of it not at all touching education and training, but some of it does, and maybe we could and should be doing more.
Ian, you mentioned language there. Actually, I think there is a market for English language in the marine sector.
Yes.
And I would seriously give that some thought, because this kind of localization of English language and moving away from tourist English, if you like, is becoming a really big ticket item overseas, because people want to be able to walk and talk the talk in a particular sector.
Yeah, it's exactly what I found when I was in Indonesia 4 or 5 years ago, going to the Maritime Polytechnic in Surabaya. Having a tour around, the facilities look remarkably familiar, good facilities. They said the cadets that come out do really well in the local market in Indonesia, but they're desperate to break into the international market, and for that they needed to be taught in English, good quality maritime English, and could we help? And it was part of my personal frustration in landing that when I came back as a request. Catherine, you've got your hand up. Catherine Nielsen.
No, sorry, I put it up by accident. Sorry.
It's not even a legacy hand. It's just an Steve, you've got your hand up. And you're on mute still.
Yeah, I'll just wait for Kathy to turn off. We've been working closely in this market with a major shipping company. I can't say who they are right now because we're under an NDA, but we're developing several levels of tests of maritime English that are actually going to be put through MCA to be evaluated at some point soon. We already do have an STCW compliant test of maritime English on our website that's been advocated by Professor Dr. Peter Trenkner, who wrote co-wrote the book on short maritime communication phrases, etc. So it is something that is being looked at very closely. And we are, like I say, we're developing 6 levels of tests at the moment. That's that.
Okay.
If you want to discuss that with us, we're quite happy to talk to you and try and give some guidance.
Okay, thank you. Blue Davis, British Marine, do you want to say more about your comments in the chat?
Yeah, thank you, Ian. I think we have
You sound a bit quiet, Blue. Do you want to come a bit nearer the microphone, or whatever?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we have a wide network of certified marina managers and professionals that we can kind of tap into all around the world, and we've got a partner organisation down in Australia that we work with as well, and that kind of works very well for what we do. The issue is, I suppose, for us is the kind of point of entry into those other countries that we're not kind of in at the moment. So we say Scandinavia, for instance, and understanding their associations, I suppose, and how they work. So, you know, we've got lots of expertise all around the world already as well that we can tap into at various points, but it's just knowing kind of how do we get to those specific kind of areas that we're not already in. So that would be helpful for us, because we've got lots of services we can offer, from accreditations to low-level training, all the way up through to a career pathway in the marina industry. So that's what our offer would be. Thank you, Ian.
Okay, thanks, Blue. Raoul Harris, Ocean Technologies, you made a couple of comments in the chat. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, just that this is something that's been done for a long time with Marlin's English language testing, made with the ISF originally, and they're a brand that we acquired in summer, I think, this year. Actually went through, and it's so the kind of call for it is understandable, but it's already kind of very much there. And the thing that Marlin's has is a good network of people in all these different regions through sort of various customer offices and other areas. So it is well covered. I think one of the things that's sort of interesting about I used to teach English myself years ago, and one of the things that struck me when I started looking into maritime was how it's strange that it doesn't follow the standard, doesn't follow these sort of recognized things that you'll see from like other EFL qualifications like IELTS exams and that sort of stuff. So I think maybe there's some room to try and establish that, because there is an IMO model English language course, but it's huge kind of and quite unwieldy and quite difficult to connect to the main areas that you would find from sort of British Council examinations more generally. And that might be an area to look at, trying to establish a marine standard.
Okay, thanks, Raoul. In terms of capability, Jonathan's suggesting something more dynamic than a document. What about telling each other what we're up to? As I said, I found it useful through those 14 pages or so, and there's more organisations who could have added a paragraph and haven't. Doubtless you could all suggest further people who we ought to learn from and involve and engage in different ways. Would it be useful just for ourselves to have something like that so people know what everybody else is up to? I can see one or two nods. I can't see everybody, of course, because too many people on the call. Thumbs up from Daryl, thank you. A couple of nods. Anyone want to comment? Are you wanting to comment, Daryl, or is that a thumbs up?
Like just an agreement. I was a bit disappointed with my entry in that document. I didn't know it was going to be published so widely. I would have put more in.
No, not at all. It's not intended to be a first draft of anything. It's just to help pursue the discussion a bit, move the discussion on a bit. Okay, we're getting towards the end of the space we've allowed for discussion. Other points that people want to raise, questions they want to ask of any of the presenters or indeed anybody else who's on the call? Are there any other topics that we've not covered that we really ought to be covering? Any other types of barriers that are getting in the way? Types of help, competition?
Ian, actually,
So go ahead.
No, please, Rob, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna return to this IP thing, because I think it's we're a big international business. We have lawyers on call that we but chasing down these kind of copyright infringements is really expensive. And I think if you're trying to do some of these smaller companies that are starting up, to try and defend anything like that is really really difficult. And I think what annoys me as somebody who has to kind of deal with these copyright infringement things, that they escalate to me at a certain point, is there's a huge amount of respectable organizations which enable it. And I'm talking about things like YouTube, which just endlessly, I have people who work endlessly going through takedown requests to YouTube and to the Apple Store and the Google Play Store. And what's happening here is this is where we have assessment products, and Marlin's is one example of that, where these are tests which are to actually evaluate seafarer competency and their fitness for a job. So it's very serious things, and there are people out there consequently who are looking to game that, and they're looking to try and find resources that can help people pass tests. And so they develop apps, they develop videos where they'll sort of show somebody kind of questions and all that sort of stuff. And it's the devil's job to try and kind of, get these things taken down. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is when you kind of get through to that point where, you've identified, for example, it's not uncommon to be somewhere like Odessa, where and you're looking then at saying, well, how am I going to find a lawyer in a local area like that can actually get anything done? So I think that looking at ways in which we, if only to give sort of companies a bit of a playbook to save them huge legal costs, to find out what they can do and what's the most effective way of doing it, and getting there would be very helpful, because even for a big company, global business like us, it's a real challenge and a real waste of money, effectively.
Well, thank you, Val, really helpful. If we were able to gather in a big room in a traditional way, you might have kind of sidled over to one or two of the others and say, that sounds like a problem we've got. How have you been trying to deal with it? And I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
It might have come over and said, well, we're working in Odessa too, and you know, what can we swap notes?
Well, advice is always helpful, but you know, I mean, to be brutally honest, there's nothing to motivate me to kind of go and waste time, you know, helping other people, other than, as you say, in a social situation, it might be beneficial. You know, I might be happy to kind of help somebody out as a fellow human being, but like, this is the message that we should sort of get together and try and police this. When you're sitting there as a government organisation or government with attachment to government, I think it's, if you're looking at where to put resource, this is something that would be really practical to be able to help people and to publish that advice about how to do it. So just give you one very simple thing that people don't know about is that you can actually shut a website down. You don't have to just ask the website owner to take it down. If you actually go to the web host, you can remove it there. So actually having letters available in different languages that can do this and as resources would be a really good use of time. I don't think people kind of getting together and saying, oh, shall we, because it's just not going to happen. Do you know what I mean? It's just, there's no, sure. I don't have the bandwidth to have those kind of discussions.
Okay, did any one of DIT colleagues want to pick up on that? And then I'll see your hand, Kathy, and then maybe you can comment. DIT?
Yeah, I would just say that, first of all, there are lots of IP and copyright protection webinars for informing you know, that expertise here in the UK, but also overseas in many of our offices. The teams there do have lots of local contacts and practical support in dealing with it in that country, because don't forget, it won't be the first time that they would have come across it. So you know, it is there. I think it's more of a case of being able to tap into it and shouting about it when it does happen to you. So you know, and I think then, you know, we can provide that expertise, but it is there already, and there is some published support. So there's an, you know, balancing overseas risk element on the UK DIT website, and included in that again is reference towards IP copyright protection. So I think the information is there. Probably what we need to be able to do is to send you all some links to that so that you have it a bit more available to you, and then we can look at where there's any deficits in terms of that expertise and support.
That'd be really helpful. Thank you. Kathy?
It was just, it seems because of what's happened towards it seems very easy for that person to just be able to copy everything, very unfair. And they've got their accreditation with Transport Canada on the back of our courses. So it would be really useful maybe for government agencies to work together so that we could go to the UK government and ask for assistance with this infringement over in Canada, in Quebec. Well, I've got the opportunity, I thought I'd put it out there.
Okay, thank you. We're in the last 10 minutes. I promised we'd finish at 12, and we will finish at 12. I've asked colleagues in DIT first whether they've got any kind of one sentence comments you want to make. Alex, Jonathan? Jonathan first.
Okay, so I would just say, for me, there are two things that have really kind of become apparent during this call. One is about the UK understanding what its offer is and what each of your roles is in that. And I think some kind of showcase dating event, whatever you want to call it internally, would be a fantastic idea, because there's a lot of things you're all doing and you're all falling over each other and you probably don't know you're there, or you don't know what shape it takes, and out of that will come some opportunities within the UK. And then also, you know, us setting up something overseas and really getting to grips with that outward facing offer, to me seems absolutely essential in whichever way you want to do it best. Thanks.
Really helpful. Thanks. Alex?
Yeah, not really much to add on top of what Jonathan's just said. I think just if there's any, if you'd like to sort of reach out to us directly, Ian, I believe you'll share the slides later where our sort of shared inbox is. So I'm very happy to hear from you that way. But yeah, no, that's just it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. As Alex has just said, we will share the slides. We will put round that attendance sheet with everybody's email address on it. I didn't want to do that this first time round because, you know, permissions and all that, but nobody shouted at me, so I'm presuming you're happy with that. If you want a different something, if I've got your title wrong, name of the organisation wrong, whatever, accidentally misspelt a name, please drop me or Chrissy a line and we'll sort it out. But in a day or two, we'll send round that list again with everybody's contact details. And there'll be one or two other links, as Jonathan and Alex have suggested, that we'll put back round. For the Commission, I'll ask Graham to wrap up in a minute, but for the Commission, I asked my colleagues to agree that we should have this first event to see what appetite there was. We've been told by Department for Transport that we've to get stuck into export, and we're keen to do that. I think that's clear. Very clear from the high level of attendance and the interest in this event. So there's lots of interest in doing that and in working together in one way or another between ourselves and Department for International Trade. So the next step for the Commission, I think, is to work out what we do with that. And Graham said we're primarily a strategic body, but this isn't quite strategic, is it? I mean, there's a strategic ambition there, but there's some practical stuff to be done in sort of linking things together. We've got a grand meeting in the middle of January, and we'll pick up the threads of this and work out what's the best way to manage things, pick up the different suggestions, and then come back to you. Jonathan's just said, can we have another of these calls in a couple of months' time? Yes, I think that would be a very good idea, but we need to work as a Commission and work out exactly how we're going to manage that. We don't have boundless resources, I'm afraid. We have Chrissy Clark half-time as providing our secretariat, and that's terrific. And Chrissy does a phenomenal amount of time within this nominal half-time that she gives us. But it's a limited resource. And we get the voluntary resource of the commissioners. But again, there's limits to that because we've all got our day jobs. But I'm really grateful to presenters, Kathy and Jonathan and Alex, Stephen and Stefan in support. Back to you, Graham, to close things.
Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you everybody, particularly colleagues from the DIT and all of you who have joined in the rich conversation that's taken place over the last couple of hours. It's been fascinating to listen to it. So thank you very much. And I think the idea of having another one of these is a good one, and we will pick up, as Ian has said, and discuss it further at the Commission. I think from the Commission's perspective, this has been really helpful, to confirm the interest and the importance of this area to us, and also for us to be able then to consider how we take this forward. I do think I emphasised at the start the strategic nature of the Commission, but clearly there are some practical elements that we will want to get involved with and to support and help, and I think this is probably one of those. I think for me, couple of takes from it, the clear insight into the work of the DIT was very, very helpful. Thank you, colleagues, for that. I think you gave us a clear invitation to engage with you to a greater extent. And I think we'll all take that away, encouraged to speak with you more and keep you informed. I'm just aware that my university does a huge amount of international business, but you know, we could link more closely with some government agencies when we're doing that. And I'll take that back personally to my own organisation. Thank you to colleagues from Versec for your insights. I thought that was really, really helpful. And the IP challenge clearly resonated, and lots of people came back to that, and there's some work that needs to be done there. I noticed some more comments in the chat as well. We faced that as well. I think all education providers who have been teaching overseas have found that one of the things that often your partners are trying to do really is to take the expertise that you've got and then begin to develop it themselves with a view to them being less reliant on you moving into the future. And that's understandable. And if you go into that arrangement with that being understood, then I think everything is okay. But clearly there's other work that needs to be done. And I think some of the advice and guidance that was requested, it would be helpful. I think in terms of the education, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's two types. There's that we deliver overseas, and there's that we deliver here in the UK, both valid
exports. Of course, there are different returns on your effort depending on what you do, and a lot of that will come down to the provider and your aims, etc. But I think the key issues that we need to take away from this are the quality just needs to be as high as it possibly can be. The relationships and partnerships is important, that idea of collaboration, and clearly we need greater collaboration domestically in terms of pulling some of these things together. I noticed a message from a chat there from Lars talking about the way that they've collaborated as a set of 4 college providers to get business that they wouldn't have been able to get on their own. But clearly it's also the importance of having a partner in country that can help you to develop the relationships with government and navigate some of the bureaucracy that may exist there. Clearly some of this will take a long lead in time. There's completely different approaches, but there's a difference between short and long courses in terms of the return, but you need a clear investment plan if you're going to go into this into the longer term. But I was also taken by the fact that we did talk about the benefits of internationalization on a more broader basis. Employers welcoming, I think, students being exposed to people from different backgrounds, different cultures, and we shouldn't underestimate the importance of that. So we're exporting to improve the quality of our product, not just to get return financially. And of course, in the UK, some courses are actually sustained by the consequence of having international recruitment. And if we weren't able to recruit internationally, then the domestic students wouldn't get access to those programs either. So I think that's absolutely critical. So for me, I took the key takeaways that we need to keep communication and dialogue going. We've already talked about the possibility of another one of these meetings. We'll pick it up at the Commission. The importance of knowing the offer, understanding what it is we do, sharing what we do, so we're all clear, so we can promote maritime education and training on that national scale. And the importance, I think a couple of people have mentioned it, of focusing on what we know and what we do well. Let's not try to go over and then suddenly become experts in all sorts of other fields, etc. And the thing that for me is underscored right the way through this is that we need to work more collaboratively. And that's domestically and internationally, as I've already said. And I think those few things will give us a steer in terms of discussion that we can have at the Maritime Skills Commission, and then we can feed back. And probably another event like this will be the way that we will be able to come back to you in terms of the development of the thinking that's taking place within the Commission. So for me, really, really useful 2 hours. It's flown by, which is always a good sign. And I, once again, would like to thank Ian and Chrissy for organising and hosting. Thank you, colleagues from the Department for International Trade coming in, and thank you to everybody who has contributed so helpfully during the course of this morning. And I think, Ian, that takes us to bang on 12 o'clock, as you promised.
Expertly done. Thanks, Graham. And thank you all. We'll be back to you.